Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Federation Hall. My name is David Sequeira. I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery, and I'm also the person who has the pleasure of putting together Art Forum for the VCA. And before I introduce our guest speaker, please join me in grounding yourself in the deep knowledge that for thousands of generations, the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation practiced song and dance on these lands. They shared stories, made paintings, made sculptures. Long before the University of Melbourne and the VCA was even thought of. And those important rituals and practices continue today. And please join me with honour and joy in acknowledging their elders, past, present and emerging. So to our guest speaker. Our guest speaker, Sarah Ujmaia, is a first-generation Chaldean artist living and working on unceded Wurundjeri lands. Her practice is largely informed by the wide-reaching impacts of forced displacement and cultural rewriting related to the diasporic experience. Applying translational processes, she generates motifs, images, and linguistic structures in her material-led approach to object making. Whether you're in Zoom land or here in Federation Hall with me, please join me in welcoming Sarah to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction and for inviting me to be here today. And thank you to all of you for coming. Yeah, I was saying before to David, I was expecting 5 people in the room. So I'd like to begin also by acknowledging where I'm situated, my privilege as a grateful uninvited guest to be located here on Bunurong, Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung lands of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I acknowledge the plural and extensive epistemologies that the lands and waters and the Indigenous custodians who have lived with them have carried and will continue to carry. I wish to acknowledge the endurance and significance of these ways of knowing and being, particularly in resistance to the colonial project. I acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded and pay my respects to all elders, to those who have paved the way, to those who are here now and to those who are to come. And I extend that to all First Nations people here today as well. I'd also like to acknowledge my ancestors, Chaldean people from Ankawa, a place in the north part of modern-day Iraq, and acknowledge that as a place of Chaldean custodianship where I understand home of my family and my ancestors. I carry my tongue within my research in relation to this place. This is a place in the mountains in the near a place called Slemania. This is an image I took in 2018 when I went with my dad on a research trip to North Iraq. I'd also like to, before I talk today, just quote this from Eva Meyer, "From the limits of my language, the beauty and difficulty of language is that you can never say exactly what you want to say. You always say both more and less because a word, as Wittgenstein says, is a signpost and not the thing pointed to. More because language takes us beyond the individual. Words always include all kinds of cultural and social connotations, and they can sketch a new world." And I think, yeah, I view that as a good and a bad thing, and kind of just want to maybe highlight that I'll probably do both more and less and say the wrong and right thing maybe. Yeah. And then, yeah, I don't know how I feel about the framing of what I might talk about in this small bit, because I've had like quite a long time away from like being in the library in an intense way. Like I've kind of had quite a few public outcomes in the past 12 months. So I feel like I've just been like high intensity studio mode. And I kind of was thinking about some of this stuff to do with tongues and studio tongues like a few years ago, like 2 years ago. So maybe I won't talk about it too much, but I do feel like it's worth mentioning because it's like kind of what I started building my ideas around. And this is a photograph from Anna Maria Melino, who I think she's kind of goals in the sense that she's had such a long career, and I think it's incredible. Yeah, from a photo series from the 70s called From What Is Left Over. And I guess a lot of what I'm interested in is thinking about the relationship between materials and language and how that manifests in the studio. Like thinking about language, materials, studio tongue, a studio lexicon, and thinking about materials as content and form. And I guess that comes from something that I consider a responsibility to language. Yeah, like I feel like language finds its way into our bodies. And I'm trying to figure out what to next do with it. This is from an essay Brooke Jarvis wrote called Where Do Eels Come From? She writes, in our age of extinctions, every loss is like this. The disappearance not just of a creature from its ecosystem, but of all that we might learn about it, all that we invest in it, all its layers of meaning from our human future. To lose the eel is one grief, to lose the eel question, another. This is another image I took on that research trip from 2018 near De Hawk. These beds are actually, it's like a dying tradition of how people would sleep in the heat of the summer. You'd sleep on the roof of the house. When I first went to Iraq in 2001, I have like really distinct like core memories of this, and like waking up in the middle of the night with like bats perched on the foot of the bed. But yeah, they don't really do it anymore because the air quality is bad and the dust is really bad for your breathing. This is my dad, who like I feel is one of the only people who spiritually understands me. And I guess I was trying to think about like images I could share of stuff that's inspiring, that's like maybe not like meant to be, or I don't know, just small bits. And this is in the Syriac Heritage Museum, which is like a museum that's formed a core part of my research. And it's not really made up of any artworks, but it's kind of built by the community, just with like agricultural objects, tools, folk costumes, jewelry, stuff that you'd find in markets, and like also recreations from clay that are like made by the people who work there. And upstairs, there's this section that's kind of got, this is the alphabet in Syriac, or like, it's like a modern adapted version of it, but I just really liked the pen, the like correction. This is one of the houses my parents lived in here. And there was just parsley growing from underneath the house that was never planted by them. But yeah, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, just, it was just growing. This is 10 kilograms of sunflower seeds in suction sealed bag that's just like normal quantity to purchase them in, because my parents would eat them every night. And I started thinking about these things as materials. And I don't think like you can map language in this way, but I just felt that it's maybe helpful to illustrate the relationship of Chaldean as a language to other Semitic languages. So I think there's often this, I think everyone just thinks all Arabs speak Arabic. which I mean, like an Arab it's a pan-ethnic identity, and like, or anyone from the Middle East speaks Arabic, right? And I think that there is like bi-directional feedback, and that's important. And I think that this kind of highlights that. So yeah, I'm interested also in how I think maybe I was like my young self thought of language change as this thing that was only happening now. But if you look at history, it's like always been happening. And yeah, maybe it's just a normal part of what language goes through. And then this is not an updated resource, but I just found stuff like this interesting. Like UNESCO made these grids that are just like, you grade them out of 5 for determining if a language is like endangered or extinct or not. And it's like actually so arbitrary to what language actually is. But it's also kind of like if you've ever marked or been marked at art school, it's kind of the same, like with criteria. Like it just doesn't really make sense. But yeah, and so I thought maybe I would talk about like coming off of the 10 kilograms of sunflower seeds. This show, which was kind of maybe a turning point and the beginning of my PhD, which I'm currently at the pointy end of. And I really was trying to develop and make these works, which use a process that I'd kind of started thinking about in my honours year. It was like I discovered I could extract the pigment from the seed, but I hadn't quite gotten anything to this point, and I was trying to, I guess, think about paintings and all these drawings that are made reference objects at the Syriac Heritage Museum, but I was also trying to think about like writing materials and yeah, I suppose just wanting to make something where I used the pigment from the seed. And yeah, I'm trying to, sorry, I thought I'd show some process because the works are made, they're kind of more like sculptures than they are paintings. They're like the seed it undergoes a reaction when it's in the right conditions called chlorogenic acid oxidation, which takes place in the protein complex of the seed. And I guess I just want to also show some of these ones which I made after that show, where I think I really started to understand the material more. And I guess, yeah, the way I think about this in relation to language and these changes is, yeah, I don't know. I think like constant engagement in the studio feels really important in becoming really like articulate or something at using them. I'm also like, maybe I won't talk too much about this stuff because I kind of want to get to talking about chalk, and it's probably, I think I've been a bit ambitious, but I was also really interested at similar time with like borders and borderings, gates, and I guess this motif that has nothing to do with Ankara at all, actually. And I guess decor. I really hate these now. But I just think I think that's really normal and healthy. Like I think it's like important to, yeah, I think it's okay to look back and hate something you've done just because it's not that I don't care about decor, but I don't think I understood what I was doing. And I'm just showing these images because I also maybe feel similar about how I used to use drawing, which feels like maybe like where I started. And I felt really annoyed by this image also when it was, I mean, it's actually a correct image, but the luster really bothered me. And then I guess I took this roll of film in 2022 when I went again to Iraq on my own, and all the images were underexposed. And again, I was documenting the objects inside the Syriac Heritage Museum. And yeah, like some of it's identifiable, but it's also really dark. And I guess also these objects are just sort of not really valued by colonizers and stuff too, which is why they still have them. But yeah, I don't know, I found the images really interesting, and I started thinking about graphite in what it could do, or how it could also be like used as content and form. And so I started thinking about making these drawings intentionally using the luster and trying to kind of obscure or abstract the images further through the material and its sheen. And I was also thinking about the framing of these drawings. Yeah, these are my inspo images of like underside, like just the frame of school desks. And like I specifically remember these tabs, like sticking chewing gum into them. And I wanted to use something like this as the frame for the drawing so that I could use the tab to drill through the front of the drawing. So that was this show at Heide kind of this time last year. Yeah, so also like I don't really know that some of the sheen worked, but also in a museum it's like you're limited with what you can do sometimes. And yeah. This is another image that Amy May Stewart took, who is very good. And yeah, and so then off the back of that, sorry, I was still thinking about light and light sources. I guess like also this, I should say, like it was really, for me, the work, I was like really sad when the photos were underdeveloped. And like going to Iraq was like so difficult, like that time, and like no one wanted to come with me. I kind of like had to lie to Monash because it's like not recommended on the government website, and like because it was like a research trip. And so I was like in Greece, and it was just it was like I was like had to have all this paperwork for like, because you can't get a visa before you go, but like I'm allowed in, but like because my parents are both Iraqi, but I don't have like citizenship, and they speak Kurdish at the airport. They don't speak Chaldean, and I don't know Arabic. They speak Arabic, but I don't know Arabic. Anyway, so I was just stressed, and so it was like this whole thing, and then I hadn't gotten COVID at all, and then I got it there. Like, so it was like, I had to pay so much money because I had to avoid Turkey. Because I wouldn't have been able to get in via Turkey. And like it was like a $3,000 flight from like Berlin. And then I just like, everything was so limited, and I was like so frustrated by that. And then I got home, and then these images were like underexposed, and I was just like, well, of course, like what else would it be? But I guess it was also just like, but it's also really connected to just how things are anyway. And it was like a poetic gesture for me to return like an image to light in order to obscure it further when it wasn't given that to begin with. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's maybe enough about that. And yeah, I was still thinking about light and thinking about conduits, like in chandeliers and like wiring, which then made these works, which were just paper and graphite. like scored paper folded, and different line drawings which wrap around them. I was like really interested in the ontology of line in relation to language. And yeah, so that's those. And then this is kind of moving into the Gertrude show, which just recently closed and wasn't on my agenda at all. And I was meant to be finishing writing my PhD, but they needed a show filled basically and asked me with 6 months, and I had 6 months of leave left, so I just took it. And yeah, this is kind of how my parents got here. They went to Jordan and lived with these nuns. And my dad is a trained physicist, but has done lots of creative things in his life, I think, without realizing it. And yeah, would cast in gypsum all these figurines of Mary, and they would just distribute them and sell them to other places. And he did that in exchange for like staying there. This is Gertrude before it was Gertrude. It was actually Furniture Warehouse direct to public. And when my parents settled here, they actually live in Preston, which is where I was born. And eventually they saved up and bought these leather couches from here. Man. And for the formal living room to never be used. And also Mark and Tracy at Gertrude told me that when they signed the lease for this place and they like ripped up the floor, he was really upset. The owner was like really sad about it. And also the tiles, there's like tiles at the front, but I don't have an image of that. And so, yeah, also I've been thinking a lot about like the process of settling here. And my dad actually was doing a PhD, his PhD in physics at around the age that I am now, and his funding ran out and he left, and he opened a floor sanding and polishing business, and it was called Super Floors. And he doesn't do that anymore, and he's got like arthritis in his knees, but he insists, like they have lived in lots of different houses, and every house that they move into, he insists on laying down the timber floor. And at the time that I was asked to do the Gertrude show, they were moving house, and I helped him lay the timber floor because of his arthritis. And then I was also thinking about the market squares in North Iraq. I guess having gone the last time, like at the peak of summer, it was like 50 degrees every day. So people would only really come out and be in communal shared spaces like at night in the market squares. Sorry, the image is really bad because I never thought I would make work about it, which is the same with the Syriac Heritage Museum. The first time I went, I didn't think it wasn't an intent to make the work about it. But I was also at that time starting to think about, and I was reading about marble as this valued, like I was thinking about like valued domestic luxuries that are like kind of, yeah, like placed in this space that aren't used, and for a number of reasons. And was reading about the metamorphic process and how like sedimentary shell becomes like calcium carbonate, which is sedimentary shell, becomes calcite, which is chalk, and then becomes limestone, and eventually, you know, under all the right circumstances becomes marble. And it's like seemingly this unfixed, indestructible material, but that's also not the case. And I guess, yeah, really thinking about that in relation to language and like how I have been thinking about language. And so I started experimenting with eggshells, just like cooking them in the oven to try to get the calcium carbonate from eggshells into calcite to just figure out what a chalk formula could be. And then I didn't really even at this point think I knew that I was going to make like 4,000 pavers, but I started ordering shell grit because I couldn't get enough eggshells from pet shops. And I started cooking them in the kiln. So, because the oven wasn't enough, it was like not hot enough to transform the mineral. But yeah, I started doing that for like 2 months. And honestly, it was actually the worst timing because Monash was renovating and there were no lifts between level 6 and 7. But I actually am have a history in powerlifting, so it was like really fortuitous because it was really heavy. Like everything was so heavy and annoying to carry. And yeah, it was just kind of like I was on a schedule, like a firing schedule to get enough material fired. And then it was just like, yeah, this is a good image because also like these are some of the shell grit that's like not crushed down physically. Like if I picked that up and squeezed it between my fingers. Also, how am I going for time? Okay, I'm like, yeah, sorry. If I squeezed it between my fingers, it would just crumble, but it was like already happening under its own weight. And I think, yeah, that was like really interesting to observe in the studio. This was just like, I was so obsessed with this. It's just a chalk making machine, like sidewalk chalk and like chalk, like blackboard chalk, which was also like a reference that I was really interested in relation to like pedagogy and like the sidewalk and like learning and rubbing things away. And this is my factory. I made the work in the basement at Gertrude, which was great. Like, I don't know where else I could have made this work over the summer. And I started with like 4 molds because I'd never cast a single thing in my life before this. It was just like, yeah. And then this is laying them. And at this point I was starting to think about like, this is at the start, the tests. I was like thinking about the textured and the smooth ones a lot. And I mean, also really weary of like Carl Andre references. I'll have you all know he died when I was installing. But yeah, it was just like a lot of like troubleshooting as I went along, made the drying racks like later. And on this day I discovered mold, which was awful because it was just so damp in the basement and it was like not a particularly hot summer. So we had to move them out and upstairs so that they could get like, yeah, Sharon, because also the pallet broke in the middle of the street, like just really not great. And then this pallet didn't fit past this handle. But we figured it all out. And like, then I just had to move everything so many times. Like each paver I moved, like the work weighs 4 tons and I moved each bit like 10 times at least. Like, yeah, just so it could all dry. Mental illness. Sorry, that's just what. Yeah, this was the install process and then this is it installed. And I think, yeah, I guess there were lots of things I hadn't thought about, like the sound, and the sound was like such a happy accident or something, the clacking. And maybe I'm just going to say this, even though I don't really, the textured and smooth thing was like, this stuff is just the fired chalk cast straight into the paver, and then these ones it's mixed in. And initially the reason why I had started making both was because I thought I potentially might have some sort of reference to the patterning of the floor from the site I was thinking about. But as soon as the mold fiasco happened, it was actually good because I brought things up and it was like this bit here. No, I've gone too far. Oh yeah, this one, where I like, as soon as I put a row of them down, I was like, actually, no, it would be way too much and I think it would get lost. And I still had more to make at that point. So yeah, I kind of changed course of, I just made all textured ones after that. And then, yeah, we deinstalled it and that's like the floor after. After we cleaned it, there's still some gentle marks, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Back. Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks for taking us through all of that. I mean, I feel like I've been, not that I've ever run a marathon. I shouldn't say I feel like I've run a marathon, but just the sort of epic nature of that installation. Thank you so much for, you know, sharing the trips to, you know, to Iraq and then all the way through to, you know, how that manifests as a 4-ton installation. Thank you. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
We've got time for questions. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask Sarah? Yeah, please.
That question's not allowed. Because it's also like, no, but like for real, because it's like, why don't we ask that of all work? And then also it's like, if you think about, because if I were to think about what am I going to do with them after, it's the same as like saying, I'm only going to make this work because I want to sell it or something. Like, it's like, like that shouldn't, like, of course your output should matter because it's like, the apocalypse is upon us, like that's true. But they're just on pallets at Gertrude. Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, I just like, I mean, no, you don't have strategies. Like, I just was like, I was around family and I just assumed my dad all the time. Like, yeah, I actually find it really hard to go. Like everything about going is really hard, but it's also amazing. Like, I don't think it wasn't what I thought. I just, like, I think I thought it was going to be hard like that, but yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, it was also like, there was like a Muslim public holiday, so everything was closed for the half of the week that I was, well, like, yeah. I don't, maybe actually, like, I hung out with my cousin more than I thought I would, which was nice because he's quite distant. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. 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 Because I mean, like, it's kind of the same as materials, like materials are so active in shaping work. And then like the space is also just as active. And I'd never made anything this big. And yeah, it was kind of, the lighting was really important. Like, I think it had this, there's like this illusion of like the tiles disappearing into the horizon where they meet the wall. And I think that that's because of the neons kind of are dead. They act as like a ring light for the work. And I hadn't really thought about that much either, except for people asking me if I was going to change the lighting. And I kept saying no. And that was like a good, just like, I don't know, like an intuitive decision or something. But yeah, I didn't anticipate that it would disappear so much where it met the wall. Because I mean, they're pale, but they're also really, there's like a lot of variation and texture, and they're kind of more beige than white, and they got super dirty, or less dirty than I thought as people walked on them. But yeah, thanks for your question.
Right, yes, please.
Hi, Jane. Thank you. Mm. Mm. Yeah. So just to clarify, your question is like about showing photographs or not, and like the decision. Yeah. Because I always feel like, I mean, like it's also really hard to like break apart different parts of your work to explain like why you did this, and I didn't want to just show like yeah, because it's like the images can say something too, and they're like interesting images, but there were like other parts that I kind of wanted to add into what I was thinking about in relation to them, and like the desks were a part of that. And I guess there was also, graphite was like a problem for me, like without realizing it, like it was like a problem that I had shelved, and it felt like a light bulb moment, for lack of a better saying. But yeah, it kind of just made sense. Like it was, yeah, I don't know if that answers what you, thank you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess like for me, it was like there was like a number of things that were really important. It was like really important to lay the floor down. Like that felt like like the core part of the concept. I was really interested in marble, and then the market square was like a way to reference site. But I guess it's like to answer your question, it was like I was thinking about how we're all active participants, and it's like we're all contributing and shaping the way all language and linguistic structures continue or globalize or yeah, change or not. And yeah, I think that's kind of what the walking on is about. But yeah, I also really didn't want it to be like an activity, or like it was important for them to have like structural integrity, but give off some residue of the chalkiness. I don't know, yeah, if anyone else went to it, but the bottoms of your shoes probably had chalk on them, and because it's like a give and take. But yeah, I really didn't want it to be like you walk you like step in and like brush the chalk. Yeah. Does that answer a little bit? Okay.
Anyone else with a question? Well, thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Oh God. Thank you. It's so great to be with you. And you know, good luck with the pointy. Are you past the pointy end or are you still at the pointy end of the PhD?
I have my final review in 2 months and then I'm just writing.
Exciting.
Yeah, great. It's great.
Yeah, terrific.
Yeah, I mean, my library days. Good.
Excellent, excellent. And to everyone here, thanks so much for being here. Just going to extend an invitation to you. Tonight at the Fiona and Sydney Maya Gallery, we have an exhibition called Signs of Life, which has 2 collaborative videos by Hivane Neunschwander and Kao Gimarantz. They're both extraordinary works. Please come by at 5 o'clock, enjoy a drink with us and celebrate that exhibition. Thanks for being here today. Bye-bye.